Morning, everybody. Welcome to the first Calcite Design System YouTube Live. I'm joined here with my friends and colleagues, some amazing designers and developers from the Calcite team. And we're really excited to talk about some of the most recent updates of Calcite. We've had 5 releases since our last big update back in May. So a lot of cool things we want to talk to you about. We're going to go ahead and introduce all of ourselves, but while we're doing that, if you could post in the chat where you're joining from, we'd love to know a little bit about you guys. So say hello. I guess I'll kick it off. I'm Julie Powell, and I'm product manager for Calcite and also our JavaScript SDK. And I'm really excited to be here with you today. Oh yeah, we're going to say one thing personal so you can get to know us a little bit. We were going to do, what do we like to do in our free time? I'm going to expose myself for being a little nerdy, and I just got my first adult Lego set. So, yeah, I'm proud. But anyway, I'm going to hand it off to Kitty. Can you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm Kitty Hurley, and I'm a product engineer on the Calcite team. Happy to see you all here today and meet with you later. Outside of work, my fun fact is with my husband, we're visiting all of America's MLB or Major League Baseball park stadiums. And so far, we're at about 1/3. And Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City is one of our top faves. I'm going to hand it over to Sky.
You're on mute, Sky. I'll try and read your lips and say what I think you'd say. This is Sky. Sky's a designer. She works on the
Wow,
Calcite team. There you go.
that was pretty impressive. Yeah, headphones just weren't connected. So first mishap of the day. You're welcome. So hey folks, I am Sky, and outside of work, I really love to work with native plants and do land restoration. I'll hand it off to Franco.
Thanks, Guy. Everyone, my name is Juan Carlos Franco. I'm the dev lead for Calcite, and in my spare time, I like to make coffee, lots and lots of coffee. Um, I think I have pretty much up to eight or nine devices for different styles of coffee in the house. So if you ever come over, you've got options. Awesome. I'll
I'm
pass it.
making notes, Franco.
Matt. Yes, you know where I live.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Driscoll. I'm a senior software engineer on the Calcite team and also on the JavaScript Maps SDK. Outside of work, I like to get out into nature, so go camping, hiking, and then when I get a chance, try to go backpacking and get some miles in. So, yep.
All right. Is that everybody? Did we get everyone? So, oh my gosh, I was just looking at the chat. We've got people from Spain and Iceland and South Africa. My gosh, Washington, Portland. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to kick it off. And for those of you that are new to Calcite, I thought I'd give you just like a really quick overview of what is Calcite. And let me share my screen right before we get into the updates. So Calcite is actually Esri's design system that we use to create our own products to have that consistent look and feel and consistent experience. We enable accessibility. All of that is using our Calcite design system throughout the Esri apps and ArcGIS Online, Enterprise, all throughout, and also in our JavaScript SDK. So what it consists of is a bunch of components. So you can go in here and explore many, many different components. For example, chips I really love using these chips. You can go in and look and see how it's used and look at a few different permutations of how it might look. Play around with the properties, like whether you want it to be selected or not, and the different capabilities or properties that particular component has. You can go in and style it to play around with how you want it to look and feel, and then use that in your application. Pop it out to a code pen and see how it works. So this little app I built a while back for our user conference, showing how you can use the nav that Kitty will talk about later, and also the chips. And you can see here, I've just pulled those into my application and kept it very, very simple. Said that I want them to be selectable one at a time, so you can kind of see how that works. So very simple to work with the components. It also comes with a whole bunch of icons, so you can filter the icons that you're interested in, like a chart, and see how you use it in your application, copy it. Also comes with a Figma UI kit. So if you are a designer and you are designing your applications inside Figma, and then you give that over to your developer team to build the app, this is a great way to do your design work and then work in the tools you're already using for your design work. And then your developers can then build that same application you've created using the same exact components that you've used inside Figma. So you can bring the UI kit directly, or the Calcite UI kit directly into your Figma experience. Also, there's design guidelines for best usage and tutorials for getting started. I really like this one where you can switch between themes and see how that works with the JavaScript Maps SDK. So yeah, play around with it, and that's the quickest Calcite overview I've ever done. So I welcome you guys to come check it out. We have lots of other resources for you to come up to speed on how to use Calcite. So with that, I think we'll get started talking about some of what's new. And we'll start off with what we're going to do for each. We're going to go through a few different components that are new. And we thought it'd be interesting to have the designer, which will be Sky in this case, talk about some of the considerations. What was Sky thinking as they were designing the component, look at it in Figma, and then we'll have a developer talk about how you can use it, demonstrate it. So we'll kind of have both the designer and developer approach to the component. So we're going to start off with the table component, and we'll have Sky kick that off. So Sky, can you start?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. All right, let's get this going.
Oh, sorry. And I should also mention, you can please feel free to post your questions in the chat, and we'll kind of get through questions after each topic. So you can jump in and ask any questions you have in addition to the questions at the end. All right. On to you, Sky.
Sweet. All right. Holler if you can't see my screen. But yeah, this is table. So this is a new component. And I know y'all are familiar with table and its use cases, but it's to present tabular data, content or information. And when you need to organize like complex data, unlike list, it may need many dimensions. So you need that row to column relationship, right? So this is a pretty introductory version of what we hope to be in time a more advanced table experience. So really looking forward to further enhancements with this. Right now, it can handle simple display of data and selection. So here's an example inside our Figma kit of the Figma component of table. And all of its capabilities should be reflected here in the kit. Quick shout out to that, by the way, is here's our community profile. So if you go here, search Esri, you can find all 3 files for our icons, our styles, and of course the web UI kit. And it is up to date with the 1.9 release. So check that out. But yeah, it has table here, so you'll see all of it is configurable at the parent level, and then at the row level, you'll have more configurations, and at the cell level. So really customizable, and a few configurations that I've put together just to show y'all. This is showing basic headers and footers. We also have the zebra striped appearance available, and the bordered appearance allows those bordered rows to come into play. You can have your table be numbered. You can insert slotted row headings, and of course selection. So you got single selection, multi-selection, and a built-in pagination. For selection, if you have one of those selection modes turned on, it's because you should have actions associated with what you can do to those selected items, right? So there is an selected action slot available for you to slot in actions up at the top right of your table. A couple other features are a clearable affordance up at the top. So we wanted to make sure that you can clear all of them at once. And up at the top, we have those chips that Julie was talking about, and it shows how many you have selected. Here is a chip to show if you have multiple items selected that aren't visible on your particular page. So if it's selected items that are on other pages and you can't see them, there's an affordance for that as well. And as you can see, these are all slots, so you can put in whatever content you want. So here we have some simple text, but you can also put in chips, a meter component we have here, and all of these can kind of interact with each other to fit your needs. And yeah, with that, I think that kind of covers the introductory of design. I'll stop talking for a second and hand it off to Kitty to speak to the code side of things.
Awesome. Thanks, Sky. I'll just share screen here. All right. So Sky gave a really great introduction as far as the design aspect of it, but then on the code side, how can you implement that design within your code base? And so this example here is showing exactly what Sky was leading into. You can have your data displayed in a tabular form. And in this case, we can also create our own branding as well. So we also support some CSS variables. In this case, I'm using the table header and the table header background variable, and I'm setting it to our Calcite UI brand. So it's creating a little bit of a good color scheme for our app and our solution. And then we're also creating some content in the data, what it looks like. We have table, we have our table row, and we have our table headers here. So we have the hiking trails, our seasons, terrain type and length, and then we have our records listed here using another table row, and then our table cells that are slotted, as Sky mentioned in their intro to the design. So the basic implementation of table, but we can also do some selections. So as Sky mentioned, we can do selections within our table, our data. We can also clear that data. We get context of how many records are selected, whether it be one or many. And so what that looks like, we go in here, Sky was mentioning bordered, and we can number those records. And then we also have a selection mode attribute as well. We can also listen to events. So we have a couple of different events that are available. In this case, listening for the Calcite table row select. And then here we can just get information in our console that some kind of change has happened as well. But you could do additional actions as well throughout the data. And then lastly, we're talking about themes, but we can also create kind of our theme throughout our app. So this is what potentially we could have as a design. This is a template. Julie mentioned this earlier, that we have on our documentation site options to do some different configurations. And one being you can actually change and see preview on our dev site what that branding could potentially look like. So this is just an example using our lavender theme that's available. In this case, we can also add in pagination. So if you have a lot of records for your table, you can also paginate that information. And with that pagination, we also have an event listener here as well. So the Calcite table page change. And so with this event, I'm setting a set focus method on the table header. So as I'm navigating through the pagination, you can see that it's adding that focus to that header row for context as well. So that can be really helpful for potentially for your users, that you want to make sure that it's providing that context to people as you're paginating through. That's a quick down and dirty of table. And I think next I'll hand it over to Sky.
Kitty, hold on one sec.
Sure.
I have a couple of questions in the chat that we might as well just go through.
Sure.
The first question was, do we support React? And I posted an answer in the chat, but just to also say it, you can just go to resources, and under there you can get to framework integration. And we have a whole Calcite components React repo there where you can easily just bring Calcite components into your React app. So definitely support React. Another question, I know who this person is. Looks like Jim Barry is asking, what's a chip? Sky, do you want to take that, or Kitty? Either one. Sky, why don't you do that one? Or you probably muted again.
We're good. All right. Yeah, chip is a unlike button, it's not going to be a clickable like action element. And then we just recently introduced chip group, which allows selection. So we do have an affordance for a group of chips to show different options, right? And then we have a single select for that and a multi-select. We have a couple great examples on the site. So I'm going to share my screen real quick if we have the time.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. Show you this screen. All right. All right. So I want to show our icon search. Over here in the left panel, we can filter by category. So great example of, a selection of options, and you can we have a multi-select configuration set up here. So we can, click multiple categories to filter by, and you'll often see that is how chip groups are used. But it can also show like status, or it can show something that just needs a little bit of styling around it alongside text. It helps to break up text without containers. But I do recommend that, like, if you are if you need like an actionable button, can consider button before you consider chip, and kind of keep those as distinct as possible. I understand there's a little bit of overlap there. Yeah, if anyone wants to add anything, I'm probably missing something with chip. Feel free to jump in.
I don't have anything. I think that was great. I mean, I guess I just really like it. Took a really easy way to like switch through different settings. Like we use it for like filtering different layers based on a certain type you want to look at. It's a really nice, like, simple way to build things in your workflow. We have a few questions. Go ahead, Sky.
I completely forgot. Sorry, still waking up. Combo Box uses chip. Combo Box is a great example of it's kind of like the reverse filtering, right? So you're choosing your options, and then inside of the input, it'll populate what items you have selected and represent them as chips. So that's another great example if you want to check out Combo Box. And then I'll stop.
Okay, that was really good. So there's a few questions about table, and that's been a component that we've had a lot of requests for, like, over time. So we're pretty excited that we were able to release it. So Jay is asking, table component is really cool. Does the table allow selection across multiple pages, with the top left chips indicating how many of them are currently selected? So I'm reading that as when there's multiple pages, like with the pagination, does it keep track as you go between pages, how many the total selected is? It's yes, right? Is that a simple yes? Yeah. Okay. And then let's see. Can the table
Julie,
sort?
Just
Go
one
ahead.
comment on that too. It'll the table will actually tell you too how many records are hidden that are selected from the page as well. So it'll give you
Cool.
more context as well. It'll tell you what's selected currently in that page, and then what is selected across all of the pagination.
That's cool. I didn't know that. And then Randy's asking, can the table sort? And do you want to talk about plans for sorting? We don't yet support sorting. Maybe Franco or any of you guys want to talk about sorting or plans for sorting in the future?
I mean, sorting it will be part of the table. Will be continually continuously improving it across different releases. So, sorting is one of the capabilities that we're considering for the advanced feature set or update.
Okay, and there's another question. There's a lot of questions about table. This is great. Can rows be colored based on certain criteria, such as observing the text in a specific property? Right now, I use the JavaScript API. It's a feature table widget, but wondering if I should switch over to this for my client. Who wants to take that? Rinka, do you want that one or?
I mean, just in terms of the question whether to switch to it, I'd hold off on that. I'd say because what I mentioned before, the advanced capabilities will be adding those like in the future milestones. So it's not completely one-to-one to what is in the Maps SDK for JavaScript. So if you have capabilities there that you're leveraging, it might be good to just stay on that for a little bit more.
Yeah, I think to add to that, feature table is really tuned to be working with your attribute data. So if you're, displaying features on a map and you're wanting to display attributes, like it is perfectly tuned to that. Whereas the table, and this is just my experience with it, so everyone should just jump in if you want to add to it, but it's a really simple, flexible way to build a table where you have control over literally most aspects of it. Like you're building it table cell by table cell. You're saying which headers you want. You can even embed other components within the table cells. You're really constructing the table, and you're responsible for populating the data however you want that data. Whereas feature table in the JavaScript API, you're really just pointing it to a layer, and it knows how to display the attributes. So it's I think the Calcite table will continue to become more advanced, have more capabilities, and there'll be more of a question there. What should you use? And who knows, maybe one day feature table in the JavaScript API will be built on top of the Calcite table. I don't know. That would be probably a goal we'd have. But today, I think you can kind of think about it that way. Do you want complete control over everything in your table? If you're working with features and attributes, definitely like the most straightforward way is to use feature table for that. Does anyone want to add to that? Or, no? Okay. So Zachary has asked, so use table when your data isn't a feature service, probably use feature table. Oh, this is a similar question. Are there any other reasons why we should use table? Any other particular use cases that were intended? I was actually brainstorming with Kitty on that because I wanted to be able to talk to that. I was thinking people might want to know. I think scenarios would be like if you want to organize just any sort of content on your page that isn't attribute data. Maybe there's, you just want to format your data with row and column, or format the information on your page with row and column. Another scenario would be like maybe you're writing out like statistics. You're writing out statistical data about what you're displaying. It's not just a direct feature attribute listing. Would be another reason. I don't know, Frank or Kitty, if you have any other scenarios that you've come across for table.
Sure.
Point out?
I think so. Calcite table will have there is going to be the goal is for it to cover two main use cases. One is totally presentational, where you just need a simple table to be stylized, present some data, very lightweight. So Calcite table should be able to give an option to that. And then later on, as we improve it, it'll also support more advanced use cases where you need more to handle more rich data and be able to have all those neat features that like something like what the feature table uses under the hood. So just to summarize, its goal is to be able to support those two different use cases and give you the smallest size component you could say for that particular use case.
It looks like there's another question. I don't know what the person's name is, but would there be a difference in load performance between the two feature table and the Calcite table, my perspective is it's really more about your data, like how much data you're actually loading more than the actual component loading. So I don't think that should be a decision factor when you're deciding what to use. I think we covered all the questions. Oh, and actually, there was a little bit more answer from another person on the team from the earlier question about theming rows. From Adam Torella, who's also on the Calcite team. He said, for theming, individual rows or cells can be themed as needed. Developer will need to calculate which cells receive value-based theming. So it looks like you can work with that. For performance, table does not currently have virtualization or any kind of lazy loading now. Yeah, it's really, it is more about the data sets, I believe. Okay. That's a lot of table stuff. So let's move on to sheet is next with Sky.
Let's do it. All right. Sheet. All right. I'm going to be showing y'all some code bins to take a look at sheet. But first, the goal of us implementing this new component is to basically support a full page sheet pattern with a blocking overlay. So what that looks like is using the scrim and having a slot for slotting in a panel, as we see here. This is helpful when you want to prevent interaction with the main application behind or any content for a really like focused workflow or ephemeral task. It's also really great for a menu navigation, displaying user or platform settings, or presenting like brief choices or decisions to a user. So here we're launching the sheet from the navigation hamburger menu. And then you can do your focused workflow. And it works really similar to Modal. The way the scrim allows you to click off of your panel and click on the overlay to dismiss the sheet. And a couple of other things to note about sheet are the position prop and the overlay versus float mode. So you can see the difference between these two are the overlay mode and the float mode is detached. So those are two different display options that you have, and the position. So you can have, in here we have the position as we have a inline start, inline end, block start, and block end. So all four corners are available to you. And there's a couple of customizations that you can find on the dev site under variables. So you could check those out. One of them is the background color, of course. So if we wanted to change this to something else, we can do so here. Oop. Maybe, or we could just do something manual. Oops. Go back. Struggling. Probably just doing something wrong that's really obvious. But anyways, you get the picture. This is already a customized color from our default, which is I got a light and dark theme sheet. And then I also wanted to jump over to Figma real quick. Of course, like all of this is represented in the kit as well, and talk about the extent of sheets. So it can be to the extent of your page here, and you can see a sheet can have a position end that we didn't see before, but it could also be to the extent of shell, because we now have a sheet slot inside of the shell component itself. So you might have different use cases for both. And here's what that would look like when it does get slotted into shell and it covers the entire shell. So it'll cover the header and the footer content. And here we have two examples of sheet at the start and at the end. And I think that covers basically the design. I think I'll hand it off to Matt if you want to talk to the code side of things.
Thanks, Sky. So as Sky mentioned, Sheet, it's very similar to Modal. I'd say functionally it's pretty much the same. Visually, it's a lot different. So it blocks the page content for like a temporary action or a simple workflow that you want to do. And so here's the Calcite Design System SDK for the Sheet component. I kind of wanted to show off some of the configuration you guys can do through the API and show some examples. So by default, the sheet is closed. So we have a button in this example that opens it, but there's just a property if you want it to be opened by default. And then there's some other properties that allow you to kind of configure the functionality wise of the sheet. So by default, if you hit the escape key, it'll close the sheet. You can turn that off by setting escape disabled. And then also for accessibility, it'll focus trap. So as you're tabbing through while the sheet is active, it kind of constrains your tabbing to keep it in the sheet. This is for accessibility. But you could disable that. We'd probably recommend keeping that on for accessibility, but it's an option. And then also when you click on the scrim or the background of the sheet, it'll close it. And there's an option to turn that off too, so that if you wanted to maintain the sheet being open, you can do that. So kind of the main difference between sheet and modal is kind of the positioning. And so by default, we have it setting to inline start, which would be, in this case, on the left side. But you could do inline end, which would put it on the right. And then to kind of go along with these positions, we also have a way for you to kind of scale the component. So when it's in the inline position, it's going to be like left or right. And then you can define how wide that sheet is going to be. And by default, that's using the width scale of medium. But you can make it a little bigger or make it a little smaller. And these widths are all relative to the size available, so it'll kind of be responsive. And then when you go to the block position, so basically top or bottom, in this case, we're showing block end. Then you get the height scale property where you can make things a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. And then for accessibility, there's a label property, so you can kind of describe the sheet and what its purpose is, so that users with disabilities can easily figure out what it's for. So let's look at the code for that really quick. So in the code, basically we have the sheet, and then inside the sheet we have a panel, and then inside the panel we have a menu. So we've kind of designed the sheet to put whatever content you want in there. In some cases, most cases, probably you want to put a panel, and that gives you the ability to close the sheet and kind of display content in a nice format. But then you have to also wire up that panel to basically listen to it when it's closed. You're going to close the sheet, and vice versa, so that they kind of are interacting together. And then as far as slots for the sheet, it's basically just whatever you want to put in there. Most cases, it's probably going to be a panel. And then Sky mentioned some of these already, but we have some variables. So if you want to further customize the max height, stuff like that, for those scale properties, you can do that with CSS variables. So if you want to tweak the widths of your sheet, you can do that pretty easily. And then the background color, as they showed as well. So yeah, it's pretty customizable. And then events, we basically just have events for opening and closing the sheet. So when it's opened or closed, or before it's open, before close, you can kind of listen to those and set up your other components to do things if you need to. Example is we have a side panel here and this is using a Calcite shell. This whole sample thing is using Calcite shell. And so when you open this side panel, you get a list of all the components.
Matt, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, what happened? Let me see. Is that better?
Yep, I see it. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So this is right. This whole frame right here of the sample is a Calcite shell, and I open this panel, which is a Calcite panel, and I can see a list of all the components. So a really nice thing about the sheet is it makes for a great responsive tool, basically. So if I go into the dev console and show the responsive mode right here, and I drag this, I can see that we switch from the Calcite panel into the sheet. So in this case, when we open this sample menu, we're using a Calcite sheet to show all of the components. And kind of the reason for doing this is because our space has become limited since our size of our device is basically a lot smaller now. So it's a nice component you can use to kind of make your app more responsible by switching from maybe a Calcite panel in a shell to being a sheet. The other thing I'll point out here is that because we slotted the sheet inside the Calcite shell, we're constraining the sheet to only be in the area of the shell. So if we didn't slot that in, it would take up the whole window. So it's a nice functionality that we added to the shell. And I'll kind of show that really quick. So with the release of the sheet, we added a slot inside of our shell component, and the slot is sheets. And so this slot is for adding any Calcite sheets that you want to constrain just to your shell.
Sorry,
so
I
you
think
may have like a
your screen, your shared tab.
Yep. Oh, is it not showing the right one? Okay, let me do that. You can see it now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Franco. So yeah, this is the shell component. If I go down to slots, there's a sheets slot, and this slot is for adding Calcite sheet components. So whenever a sheet is placed inside of the slot of the shell, it's going to be constrained to the shell. So it's a nice functionality we added along with the sheet component. Cool. So that's the sheet. I'm gonna pass it back to Kitty to talk about meter.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Julie, do we have any questions on sheet
There
before
was
we move into meter?
there's just one question about terminology. Like, is sheet the same as drawer? And I put an answer in the chat that it's the same. I think.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Yeah, drawer, sheet. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just note real quick to speak to mobile. Considering your viewport, if you're at a really narrow viewport on a mobile device, for example, consider that when you pick your position value. So it's really common to have like a block end position value on a mobile screen. You'll see that paradigm a lot, and that's really helpful for those use cases.
Awesome.
That's great. Good overview.
Really great questions coming in the chat too. Keep them coming, guys, and everyone. Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about meter. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So meter is a really great component that can be used to represent available quantities or display measurable units. It can be used to display an amount of resources that are remaining or they're yet to be used. So they can represent the quality of the resource depending on that value in relation to its min and its max limits. And so I'm saying some of these things like value, min, and max, these are the attributes of the properties that you can use in your code or your designs as well. It can also be used to display a count or quality when the max is a known value, such as like the number of days where precipitation has been recorded. So you've kind of a couple of examples today. We've seen the documentation side. This is a good example of what you can get information for with the component. So it's kind of giving like an overview, but you can also get some usage as well. So these are just some examples in the case of meter where the use are use cases for your applications and your solutions that you're building. So examples are like the displaying of amount of storage that is left on like a hard drive or the space that's left if somebody's adding in information to your site and you're trying to depict that information back to the user as an example. So dive into a couple examples, and also I don't know if this has been I can't remember if this has been shown yet, but we do have these configurations as folks have been kind of showing today. You can also open CodePen to do more manipulation as well. So if you're getting familiar with some of the props and the attributes, you can then go out to CodePen and start manipulating even further. And so an example being, here's an example of meter using percentage, just showing the depiction of how far we are in the progress in the percentage and what that looks like in the code. We have label. A couple folks have mentioned this today. It really helps with assistive technology. So accessibility, making sure that your content is available to more audiences. Here's our value. We're doing some labeling using this range labels attribute, and then the value label, so showing that value. But then we can do a little bit more with that as well. So we're talking about units as well. So in the case of units, we can also add in this case, miles. If we wanted to track our marathon, if we were trying to depict this on our site and we wanted somebody to see the progress over time, we could see where the status is. So what that looks like in the code. We have a Calcite label giving some context to that meter component. We have the label associated with it as well. We also have the max set. We have our value that's depicted. We also have the units being changed here. So that instead of showing that percentage, we're showing units, and we can change our unit to be whatever it makes sense for our case. In this case, it's miles. And so we can do a lot with that. In addition, we talked about branding earlier. We can also fit branding that then changes across the component as well. So this is, again, using that lavender theme that's available on the developer site. And then lastly, this is shown a bit earlier by Sky in some of the designs of table, but we can also input in meter within table as an example. So we can really have these complex solutions depending on the use case and the need to show information in a really great visual way for our users. And again, we can do branding. And so this is using that lavender theme again, and you can see both the table and our meter are getting that branding that works best for our use case. So lots of flexibility, really great visual tools between using the meter and the table components. And that's pretty much it for meter. But are there any questions that popped up, Julie, in the chat?
No questions.
Awesome. So I think next up, we're going to talk about input time zone with Franco. So Franco, take it away.
Thanks, Katie. Cool. So yeah, I'll dive right into the input time zone. And just for context, this component was introduced, I believe, like at 1.0, if my memory doesn't fail me. And what it allowed you to do is, like, as it's an input that shows different offsets representing the different time zone offsets that you might be using or getting associated with some like timestamps, for example. So one of the really neat things that we improved in the latest release is to introduce to improve these options that are being displayed to the user. And I have this demo app here in the top right corner. You should be able to see the input time zone here. And the difference from the release prior to that is that now you get a label showing like the different cities that are will fit into that time zone offset. So for example, here we have LA going into the -8 here. And just for background, the map that I'm using here, its time zone data is not daylight savings time aware, so it might not be consistent with our current time zone. But I've have this sample here showing like if you click on a different time zone option here, you now get the offset displayed on the map. yeah, that's like a quick and short recap of what this component does. And as of the latest release, we added some extra features to it, and I'll just walk you through them. So one of the cool things that we introduced is, since this component under the hood is using the combo box, we also expose the max items property. So for example, by default, we'll show as a certain amount of items when you expand the component, but when you set the max items property, you're able to control that a little bit better. And if you want to like show a smaller set of options, you can go ahead and do that fairly easily. The next feature that I want to talk about is, if you have, like I mentioned before, the data set has its own time zones defined, and it's not aware of daylight savings time, but you can, and by default, the component will try to select the user's time zone. So for example, here we are in the -7 time zone offset, so it'll pre-selected by default. But I can choose a different starting point for that, and it should also affect the way the time zone items are grouped. So for example, here you see Creston, Dawson Creek, Hermosillo, Mazatlan. But once I modify, I think that failed, but I'll need a double check. I'll make sure to fix this in the code pen after the session. But what you should be able to see is once a different reference data set, it'll populate the groups differently, and takes into consideration the reference date for daylight savings time. So yeah, you can set this option to better suit your application's needs. Next up, something to call out is that the labels displayed here are localized. So if I change the language to be Spanish, for example, you should be able to see now the accent marks, and then the E here at the end of the options here when you have multiple items. And I should also mention that the way these different cities are separated are using INTL behind the scenes, so they should also be localized as well. Another option that I want to highlight too is that we introduced a list mode. So for example, if you don't want to work necessarily with offsets and want to provide your user the exact time zone name, for example, that are coming from the IANA time zone database, you can go ahead and use the list mode. And once you apply that, you should be able to see now like the list of all the time zones here that are supported. And I should know that this also affects value. So by default, value is the offset of the time zone in minutes. And when you change the mode to list, it's now the actual IANA time zone name. Oh, and one neat thing that I also want to call out, and I'll refresh the application here, is that if you, for example, you don't see the city you're interested in the combo box, you are also able to look for it, even if it's not displayed on the label, and it should be able to find a match if it has a corresponding time zone label. So yeah, just a quick and simple demo walking through the enhancements we made to the input time zone, and I hope you leverage it in your apps and interested in seeing what you can come up with. Thank you. I'll hand it back to Sky to talk about responsive layout efforts, and I'll help out as well.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thanks, Franco. That was great. All right. So let's show Figma again. Yeah, quick note on Figma. I hope that some of y'all are using our kit. If any of y'all are designers out there, yeah, curious, put it in the chat, like holler if you are a Figma user. And I know that we have a mix of developers and devs in the audience. Quick note on using our community kit. I know that there have been a few questions about how to leverage these 3 files in communication with one another. So how to link the icons and the styles libraries to be consumed by the kit. Coming soon, we will be putting together a brief demo. I know there's tons of resources out there, so lots of videos out there of like how to do that. You could definitely find those answers out there, but we want to make sure that we're helping folks out on how to use that from the community files. So we will be putting a video out there just to show you how to set this up on your own system. And to jump back into responsive layout, I am showing here a breakpoints graph because the goal of the responsive layout enhancements are to build in a component layout behavior to all of our components to respond to screen size, platform, and device orientation. So a lot of our components built for the web were already fairly responsive, and we were doing an audit to go through all of our components and identify where there may be undesirable behavior, mostly when things get to smaller and smaller viewports, and improve those experiences for our components when you maybe are on a mobile device, for example. So first step was to establish breakpoints from all the way from extra small up to large, and that's the graph that you see here, and defining their mins, widths, and max widths if they have them. And from there, map out, where we identified the undesirable behavior, and build in what we would want those components to look like at the smaller breakpoints, and also ensure just that hit target minimums are being met on a mobile device that may be smaller on a web device. So our checkbox, for example, we've improved the hit target to make sure that you can tap that check mark with your thumb, even if you're on a mobile device, etc. So for example, we can take a look at the alert component, which is one of the components that we've already enhanced and put out in 1.9.0. And as you can see down here, we have the alert component in 3 different layouts depending on its width. So that's a quick plugin right here that we used. Super helpful to be able to demo this inside Figma. So now we'll be able to see the responsive behavior change from a really wide, large breakpoint out here, and then we will shrink this down, and large and medium, it'll stay the same. It has enough room for the whole kitchen sink amount of content. But as soon as we hit the small breakpoint, we're going to see that it allows those actions in the actions end slot, as well as the queue count, to be able to be rearranged to the bottom, so that it makes a little bit more horizontal real estate for that text. And then one more layout change when we get to the extra small breakpoint. When we get into the really small, narrow viewports, we allow that icon to not, take up horizontal real estate, and we stack it to the top to be in line with the close button. So that's one example of the responsive layout that we're building into some of our components that needed a little bit of extra love at the smaller viewports. And we're looking at several others coming your way soon. So alert, we've done increase the hitbox for checkbox, and then we have stepper coming, tabs, as well as tile and tile group, and similar enhancements that you see here. I think that's about it on the design side and those considerations. And Franco, if you want to jump in, it's all you to talk about the code considerations as well.
Sure. So just to give a brief recap of where we're at here is we started updating some of our components as of the last release with these types of more drastic responsive changes. Some of our existing components worked well on a mobile with, so we started updating some of the components to be more to shift their layout around a bit more in some of these use cases. So that work started this release, and like behind that, there was like multiple pieces to it, because we If you're not aware, we have the design tokens being consumed by the components, and these had to also provide different ways of consuming the breakpoints. Once we brought those in, we were able to reference them inside of the component during rendering. And I believe we've installed the responsive updates for a couple of components. We have, if you go to our repository and check, just interested in checking out the pull requests, there's a few that are coming soon. So we're shooting to have all of our components be responsive by the next main release. So just to give you a little time frame to keep in mind, I believe that is it in terms of the implementation side of things. Anything else that might have come up?
There's no questions. There was a comment by Jay that he loves the responsiveness of the components. Thumbs up.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm excited about it too. So I think we're going to do one more topic, or two more topics actually. Kitty is going to talk about a few components that weren't in our October update. They're actually part of our May update, but we feel that they're so important, or we think they'll have a lot of usage. So it's worth covering it. So Kitty, can you share about nav?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. I hope everybody's excited about the responsive design. It's a huge initiative that we're trying to fit all of your apps to. So looking forward to seeing all of your apps using the responsive design in the future. So yeah, as Julie mentioned, navigation was a huge component, and a bunch of additional components, children and menu that came in our May release. And as Julie mentioned, it was something that was so large that we'd like to share with you today. It gives you some opportunity to allow structure and give structure and location to your users, so that they can work within the application and have that consistency across your application or solution. And so I have a couple examples showing what that could potentially look like. Some of these starters are also available on our doc site as well. This one has navigation. We have shell kind of housed throughout the application. We have our navigation. We have the slot for the header. We're using our child component, in this case, the navigation logo, slotted in our logo here. I'm giving some context to our users. And then we were talking about Calcite chip and chip group earlier. This is another newer component that's available. And this gives the flexibility to then change the chip using some selection, in this case, with our navigation. And then at the very end, we have a slot, a content end, that we're displaying some additional context. And so we have our map here below, can make this a bit bigger, and we can switch our base map when we're switching those chips within that chip group. So I'm just doing kind of an event listener here, waiting for the Calcite chip select, and then using the value of that chip. So right here, this chip value to then change the base map in our map. So pretty nifty. We can do more with this, also doing some theming as well, but just a really basic use case for navigation to kind of give yourself some branding within your app. And then next, for kind of like the more formal looking navigation, we also have some like breadcrumbs that are available and some additional information that can be slotted in as well. So again, we have that navigation logo that's available. We can add a description as well, which is really nice if you want to provide additional context within your navigation. And then we're talking about additional components. So we also have menu, which can be used by itself or within navigation. In this case, we're slotting in the content end, and then we're putting in a couple different options for putting in observations of animals. We have land and ocean. Right now we're selected on ocean, so we can then set up our breadcrumbs that have animals. They're marine type animals, mammals, and whales, so that we can have that additional context when our users are interacting with the application. So really, really great tool. We're working on also transforming some of our samples to include the navigation as well. So you'll see that coming in the coming weeks, and hopefully before our next main release as well. And then kind of changing gears as well, we've talked about accessibility a few times today, and so we wanted to also highlight this resource as a great resource for you as well. While Calcite has accessibility in mind, there's stuff that you as a developer have to do to continue that path for your users to make sure the accessibility is a forethought into your solutions as well. And so to navigate there, you can go into our main site, foundations, and then it is under the foundations pages. So we have some content just about designing for specific audiences, depending on maybe like where their background is, where they come from, just some considerations to keep in mind. We have a couple examples using Calcite components. In this case, it's showing color not to be used by itself. So we have an icon that's being used as well, and some text context. And then just talking about some things that you can do in your apps, such as headings, setting the language, some keyboard operability to keep in mind. Focus states, we talked about that a few times today as well. And then forms. This is a big one for making sure that assistive technologies can interpret the context that you're providing. And then lastly, at the bottom of the page, we also have a checklist that's available. So if there is something that you'd like to kind of like reference as you're creating your solutions, we actually have a physical kind of box check using the check boxes to kind of go down the line and see if your apps are fitting some of those not recommendations or best practices. But note that this isn't like the end all means to everything. It's just a starting point for you and your apps. But that is all I have for the accessibility part. Are there, I guess I'll hand it back to Julie for any final questions that folks have.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions. We had a lot of great questions during the presentation. If anybody would like to post now, please do. Otherwise, we're also really interested in your apps. So if you have an app that you're excited about and you want to share with the team, we would love to have a look. I posted a link to Esri Community where you can go and share your work and interact with the team. We'd love to see it. We also have the European Developer Summit coming up that I wanted to make sure everyone knew about. If you're located in Europe, I saw many of you are. It's coming up, I think, November 14th. We have multiple Calcite topics and JavaScript Maps SDK that we'll be covering. That's going to be a great event. We also have the Palm Springs Developer Summit coming up next March, and we're currently planning all of the tech sessions that will be shown in that event, which there'll be a lot of great ones. So wanted to encourage everyone to meet us there. We did get one question. Okay, this one's going to be for Franco or Matt. A little off topic, but what is the recommended build tool with React? Is it Vite? I said that right? Isn't it Vite? I want to say Vite, but I think it's Vite.
I believe so.
Can you take that one, Franco? Can you answer that one?
I think Ben Ellen from the team would know more about this, but I think Vite builds are supported. Yeah, we need to double check, but I think you have options. In terms of builds, we made some. A few releases ago, we had to fix a few issues that we found that were reported when like building on the using the React wrapper.
We're actually, just since it came up, we're working on a new tutorial for the JavaScript Maps SDK right now. We're introducing mapping components as web components, which we're really excited about. So basically wrapping all of the widgets as web components, wrapping the map as a web component. And so we're releasing that in beta in a few weeks here in October. And one of the tutorials is actually using I think it's using React too, Franco, to build the components and kind of like show how you'd use it within a framework, using a new tool that we haven't used before, I think StackBlitz. Anyway, yeah, if you're interested in React and web component, that's going to be an interesting tutorial to have a look at too. So keep your eye out for the October 4.28 release for JavaScript Maps SDK. So I think that's it, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It was been pretty fun and our first time doing a YouTube Live for Calcite. Yeah, and you can subscribe to the Esri developer channel and see other events that we do on our developer technology. Leave a comment for us. Just let us know if you're looking for a particular component or you want to share feedback. You can also connect on Esri community. And yeah, we all just appreciate all your work. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.